Police officers at Reddit. What is your best "I think we have the wrong person" story? I remember when my son was 3 weeks old. It's 3 a.m. and I'm laying down on the couch. Baby is in his rocker. Suddenly there is loud knocking on my door followed by police. I thought for sure it was my friends coming back from the bar and they needed a place to crash, and they have done that police knocked to me before. So I'm sitting there mad thinking, don't they know I just had a kid? Needless to say, I didn't answer the door. Figured they could find somewhere else to crash. Next thing I know, my door is kicked down. I grab baby and run towards the door, and 4 or 5 police officers run in. They search my house with flashlights. Scared the crap out of my sleeping husband. My 5-year-old didn't wake up though, laugh out loud. Turns out they had the wrong address. They apologized and a week later they installed a new door for me. But holy fuck, that was scary. I was a curious little kid. My father stopped at the local liquor store to grab a bottle of wine, and I was poking around. The door to the office was unlocked and I wandered inside, sat in the chair and spun around a few times, got bored, wandered out. A few days later my father gets a call from the police, and we go in. As the officer is speaking to us, I proceed to spin around in a chair and pick up and look at everything on his desk. After about a minute the officer says, "Thank you for coming in. I see what happened. You can go." Turned out the owner's teenage son stole a few grand from the store and tried to blame it on the handsy 5-year-old. 2 of my colleagues, murder squad detectives, attended custody to meet a defendant answering bail. When they arrived at the custody desk, there were a couple of people hanging around, waiting for their solicitors. They told the custody sergeant they were there for insert name, and he pointed one of the guys out. They went up and introduced themselves and said they would be questioning him at another station. So all 3 got in the car and headed off. Whilst driving, they told the defendant what would be happening on arrival. He would be arrested on suspicion of attempted murder, questioned and either bailed or remanded. The guy was like, "You've got to be joking. Attempt murder? I was shoplifting." He was relatively calm, half laughing and shaking his head. A short time later one of the officer got a call from the custody sergeant. Their actual bail appointment had arrived. There were 2 defendants with the same name answering bail that day. They apologized to the non-murderous shoplifter, turned the car around and headed back to bring the right person in for questioning. Keystone Cops to the max. In our family we had a great uncle who tattooed his name and social security number to his shoulder. Apparently he had the same name and birthday as another guy with a prison record, and had kept hearing about it. It came in handy at least twice when he was pulled over and the cops started arresting him. Each time he got out because he had his social security as proof that he was innocent. Old neighbor accused me of stealing from his house and eating his food and stealing his dead wife's jewelry. He said I matched the build and clothing of the thief. Police came to our house and they knew my dad and were skeptical to me being a criminal. I do pass the guy's house when I walk home, but I didn't even know someone lived there. Neighbor was adamant when they showed my face to him and said his oldest grandson is going to stay with him so he could be safe. Grandson arrives and police notice he looks like me, the build and clothing especially. Yeah, turns out his grandson would come to sneak into his house and steal stuff to feed his drug habit. I've got 2, from 25 years ago when I was a cop, one on one side of the badge and one from the other. The first, I got assigned a warrant service to pick up a wanted felon. Mr. Robertson was 6' tall, 250 pounds, long red hair, bushy red beard, and lived at, let's say, 123 Elm Street. Pretty distinctive dude. So I roll up to 123 Elm Street, and sure enough, there mowing his lawn in the front yard is the man himself, 6' 250, red hair, red beard. I make contact with him. "Hey, Mr. Robertson, you got warrants and it's time to go to jail." Hook him up, take him to jail, and in central booking I get his property off him, and while filling out the inventory happened to notice this guy is Mr. Robinson, not Robertson. Sure enough, the wanted guy was my guy's landlord, and his twin brother from another mother doppelganger. When I'd said Robinson didn't even twig to the fact I hadn't said his name. He just heard the similar sounding name as his own. We had to walk the whole thing back and reactivate the warrant, then kicked him loose with a handshake and an apology. The one from the other side, I had just gotten off duty at 2 a.m. and was driving home still in uniform. There wasn't any other traffic on the road, so I wasn't really surprised when a police car turned in behind me and started following me. I figured he was trolling for drunks and I was the only thing moving on the road, so he was just going to follow me a little to observe my driving, and he'd realize pretty quick I was sober and peel off. Instead, another patrol car joined him, and another, and another. Then all four lit me up and spread out behind me, blocking the road in a full felony stop. Well, this just got interesting. They went through the whole procedure, and I carefully followed their instructions. When they finally got me out and saw my uniform, they just stopped for a few seconds while I was trying to figure out just what the hell was going on. Then 3 of the officers got in their cars, turned off their lights, and took off, while the original officer told me I could put my hands down and explained what was going on. My car was a spot-on match for the suspect vehicle in an armed robbery and shooting that had just occurred right up the road. I'd driven right by the scene before the cops even got there a few minutes before the officer in the next district spotted me and thought I was the suspect. It was an interesting night. Not a police officer, but one night around 8 p.m. my fiancé received a call. "Officer, Derek, we have your health card. Tell us your whereabouts right now." "Fiancé, this isn't Derek. Oh, you sound like Derek. Your buddies ratted you out and gave us your number. Now where are you?" "I'm not Derek and I'm not telling you where I am." "Who are you?" "Oh, this is Officer Smith. Stop messing around and tell us your location." "Derek." Again, Derek is not my name. "How do I know you're a real officer?" "Oh, boy, if you don't tell me where you are, you're going to be in much more trouble. My badge number is blank." "Okay, fine. I'm at home at blank. If you don't show up in a police car, I'm not coming out." He hung up the phone, dialed 911 cause we live in a bad area and wasn't sure if this was a fake call or not. Operator verifies that it was a correct badge number. The officer called back. He apparently misdialed by one number. He apologized, but still blamed my fiancé because you were being very defensive and sounded guilty. Since everyone else isn't a cop, I was 16 and worked at a golf course mowing lawns and such. We got a call at home from the cops that said I'm a suspect in a hit-and-run accident because my plate #S were on the car that drove away without stopping. The cops said the car was maroon colored. My car was gray. We told them and figured that was that. The next day at work there was a minor accident. A dumbass coworker pulled a metal rake too hard and the rack holding it came down onto my forehead. It wasn't a deep wound, but it bled a lot. My boss took me to the ER to get my head superglued, and to be safe, took me home too. Thus my car stayed at the golf course. That evening a cop comes by and finds me with a head wound and my car is missing. I look quite guilty. By sheer luck, the cop calls someone after talking to my parents and discovers they got the guy and the plate numbers were close. I probably would have been arrested. Someone had stolen a car and I went to go check it out. I'm driving behind what I think is the car. It had the same color vehicle and same car and the mistake I made was not matching the license plates. I pulled them over, got out the car and realized it was my friend with his family. I reread the license plate and I noticed they were the same except for the last letter on the plate. The last letter on the stolen car was J. The last letter on my friend's was I. I laughed it off and apologized and we went out to dinner later that night. Not a police officer, but I was the wrong guy once. I was dating this girl and when things didn't work out, she got vindictive. She had a copy of my car insurance and got a guy friend to pose as me to call the police and report my vehicle stolen. I go bebopping out of work one glorious Friday afternoon and get felony stopped by about 10 Dallas, Texas PD officers. Guns drawn on me and everything, right outside of the large office complex I worked at. Turns out the people who reported my car stolen used their own phone number when filing the report and eventually got caught and charged. There had been a string of robberies, 7 in 2 weeks, in my neighborhood, so everyone was on high alert. I was home by myself, and one of my dogs started puking, so I rushed to let him outside, forgetting my dad had set the alarm. We had a silent alarm, so I had no clue it had been tripped. sending out a dispatch request to the local 5-0. 5 minutes later, there was a knock on the door. I'm young, home alone by myself, and had been told to never answer the door if I was alone, so I didn't. They kept knocking. Long story short, they broke the door down. They thought they had caught the burglars. Multiple cars. I vaguely remember there being a K9 unit involved, and the police said their suspect, a 9-year-old girl, crying her eyes out. I was not the group of thieves, who ended up being caught about a week later.